Here, please, take this. It's not much, but nobody should go hungry when I have something to share." The voice was gentle, almost apologetic, as 33-year-old Dalton Reed knelt beside the woman huddled against the cold brick wall behind Mercy Heights Hospital. It was barely 6 a.m., the November air biting and unforgiving, and the woman, wrapped in layers of worn clothing, her face hidden beneath a hood, hadn't moved in over an hour. Dalton had noticed her during his pre-dawn rounds, emptying trash bins and mopping corridors, and something about her stillness troubled him deeply. He extended his lunch bag, a modest sandwich his neighbor Mrs. Parker had made him, an apple, and a thermos of soup. "I know what it's like to be invisible," he said softly, "to feel like the world just walks past you. But you're not invisible to me." The woman's head lifted slowly, revealing tired eyes that held something between suspicion and desperate hope. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe early 30s, with dark circles and the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from fighting battles no one else could see. "Why?" she whispered, her voice raw. "You don't even know me." Dalton settled onto the cold pavement beside her, his janitor's uniform already dirty from the morning's work. "My mama used to say, kindness doesn't need a reason. It just needs a willing heart. And right now, my heart's telling you you need this more than I do." What Dalton didn't know was that the woman, accepting his lunch with trembling hands, was Dr. Sutton Merriweather, the newly appointed director of Mercy Heights Hospital's board of directors. And she wasn't homeless. She was conducting what her predecessor had dismissed as an unnecessary social experiment, spending 3 days disguised as someone experiencing homelessness to understand how the hospital staff truly treated the most vulnerable members of their community. Sutton had proposed the idea after reading complaint after complaint about how security guards routinely removed unhoused individuals from hospital property, how ER staff sometimes treated them with barely concealed contempt, how the institution's mission of compassionate care for all seemed to have significant blind spots. Her board colleagues had been skeptical, some openly hostile to the idea, but Sutton had insisted she needed to know the truth. For 2 days, she'd been ignored, moved along, or treated with visible discomfort by nearly every hospital employee who passed, until this janitor, with kind eyes, had stopped and offered her his only meal. "What's your name?" Sutton asked, carefully unwrapping the sandwich. Dalton Reed. I work nights here, cleaning mostly. Been doing it for 5 years now." "That's a long time," Sutton said, taking a small bite and fighting tears at the simple kindness of warm food. "Do you like it?" Dalton shrugged, a sad smile crossing his weathered face. "It's honest work, keeps me going. I used to have bigger dreams, wanted to be a paramedic actually, started the training program, but life had other plans. My parents died in an accident 7 years ago, left me with their medical debt. Then my wife, she left because being married to a janitor wasn't the life she'd signed up for. Said I'd given up, settled for less than I was capable of." He paused, looking at his hands. Maybe she was right, but someone's got to keep these floors clean, keep the hospital running. And I figure if I can't save lives, at least I can make the place safer and cleaner for the people who do. Sutton's throat tightened. Here was a man who'd faced loss and rejection, who worked a job many considered beneath notice, yet still had enough compassion to share his lunch with a stranger. "Your wife was wrong," Sutton said quietly. "Character isn't measured by your job title. It's measured by moments like this." Over the next 20 minutes, they talked. Dalton shared that he'd been saving for years, hoping to eventually finish his paramedic certification, but medical debt and living expenses made it feel impossible. Sutton, still in character, spoke carefully about her own fictitious struggles, but found herself genuinely moved by Dalton's unguarded honesty. When Dalton's supervisor radioed that he was needed inside, he stood reluctantly. "I work here most nights. If you need anything, even just someone to talk to, I'm usually around the service entrance around this time. Nobody should have to be alone." Sutton watched him walk away, this janitor who'd given her his only meal, and felt something shift in her understanding of what true compassion looked like. The following Monday, Mercy Heights Hospital held its quarterly all-staff meeting. The auditorium was packed. Doctors, nurses, administrators, support staff, and yes, janitors. Dalton stood in the back, as he always did, feeling out of place among the medical professionals in their white coats and scrubs. The hospital's CEO took the stage, then introduced the new board director. Please welcome Dr. Sutton Merriweather, who comes to us with extensive experience in healthcare administration and a reputation for innovative approaches to patient care. Dalton's world tilted as the woman from behind the hospital, cleaned up, professional, unmistakably the same person, walked onto the stage. His heart sunk. Had he been part of some test he'd failed by not recognizing her? Was this some elaborate setup? Sutton's eyes swept the room and locked onto Dalton's. He saw his confusion, his fear, and something in her expression softened. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady but emotional. "Before I discuss my vision for this hospital, I need to tell you about something that happened last week. I spent 3 days outside this building, dressed as someone experiencing homelessness, observing how our staff interacted with the most vulnerable members of our community." A murmur rippled through the auditorium. Dalton felt his face flush hot. "I was ignored by most people, moved along by security, treated with discomfort and sometimes disgust by nearly every hospital employee who passed, until this janitor, with kind eyes, stopped and offered her his only meal." Sutton's voice grew thick with emotion. "A night janitor named Dalton Reed gave me my lunch, not because he knew who I was, he had no idea, not because he expected anything in return, but because, in his words, nobody should go hungry when they have something to share." Every head in the auditorium turned to look at Dalton, who wanted to disappear into the floor. "Mr. Reed," Sutton said, directly to him, "could you please come up here?" Dalton shook his head, mortified, but his supervisor gave him a gentle push. He made his way to the stage on shaking legs, certain he was about to be publicly humiliated for some protocol violation. Instead, Sutton extended her hand. When he took it, she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "This hospital's mission is compassionate care for all, but somewhere along the way, we forgot that all means everyone, regardless of insurance status, housing situation, or social position. You reminded me what that actually looks like in practice." She paused, gathering herself. "I learned from my predecessor that you've been trying to complete your paramedic certification for years, but couldn't afford to continue your education. Is that true?" Dalton nodded, unable to speak. "Effective immediately, Mercy Heights is establishing a staff education fund. You'll be its first recipient, full tuition coverage for your paramedic training with flexible scheduling to complete your clinical hours here. And when you graduate, you'll have a position waiting in our emergency services department if you want it." Dalton's knees nearly buckled. I don't understand. I just gave you a sandwich." "You gave me more than food," Sutton said, her eyes bright. "You gave me hope that the values we claim to hold as an institution actually exist in the people who work here. You proved that compassion isn't about titles or degrees. It's about seeing people's humanity and responding to it." What Sutton didn't say publicly, what she shared with Dalton privately later, was that she'd been battling her own darkness. Her long-term partner had left her 6 months earlier, telling her she was too idealistic, too naive about human nature. She'd thrown herself into work, but the breakup had left her questioning whether kindness was just weakness in professional clothing. "You reminded me why I chose this work," she told Dalton over coffee in the hospital cafeteria weeks later, now as colleagues and friends. "My ex said I expected too much from people, that I'd be disappointed when I realized most people only look out for themselves. But you proved him wrong. You had every reason to ignore me. You were working, you had your own struggles. I was a stranger.
but you stopped anyway." Dalton smiled, more confident now than he'd been in years. "My mama also used to say that we're all just walking each other home. Sometimes we carry each other's burdens for a while. That's not weakness, that's what makes us human." 6 months later, Dalton graduated from his paramedic program with honors. Sutton attended the ceremony, watching him receive his certification with genuine pride. The hospital had changed too. New protocols ensuring respectful treatment of all patients, expanded services for unhoused individuals, and a culture shift that valued compassion as much as clinical excellence. On Dalton's first official day as a paramedic, Sutton met him at the ambulance bay. "Ready to save lives?" she asked. "I hope so," Dalton said, then added softly, "Thank you for seeing me, for believing I could be more than—" "You were always more," Sutton interrupted gently. "I just helped clear the path for you to show everyone else what I already knew." They stood in comfortable silence, two people who'd met in brokenness and helped each other find purpose, watching the sunrise paint the hospital walls gold. Because kindness is never small. A shared meal, a moment of recognition, choosing to see someone's humanity when the world makes them invisible. These acts ripple outward in ways we cannot predict. They remind us that our worth isn't determined by our circumstances or job titles, but by our willingness to reach out when we have something to give, even when we feel we have nothing at all. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let's spread more stories of kindness and hope together.